This is episode 27 of On the DOT, your go-to source for information about the Indiana Department of Transportation. Every month we take you on a deep dive into the inner workings of the agency to answer your burning questions about roads, bridges, and everything in between. On this month's episode, we're talking emergency preparedness and Indot emergency operations with Mike Nichols and Lyle Sadler. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the latest installment of On the DOT. Welcome to On the DOT. I'm Jason Tiller, and joining me this month is Mike Nichols and Lyle Sadler. They are our guys. I honestly don't know what your title. That seems to be a theme with me on this podcast. I get on here and I forget to ask the titles right before we start recording. So we've had a great conversation here in the kind of pre-recording time, talking about what we're going to discuss and things of that nature. And you guys, I tell you what, you all are cut-ups. I love it. This is one of the most fun interviews I think I've done so far.
Oh, well, if you don't make it fun, then it's considered work. So
yeah, exactly. What is that saying? You know, if you have fun at work, you never work a day in your life, or something to that effect.
There you go.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm paraphrasing. So why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves to the listeners and let them know what you guys do at Indot.
I'm Mike Nichols. I'm the Division Director for Emergency Planning and Response. And what we do is our primary thing is to kind of help bring bring calm to chaos, working with other state and local partners at incidents or events, and helping maintain efficient use of resources.
My name's Lyle Sadler. 2 weeks away from completing my 41st year with Indot. I've been with Emergency Planning and Response for about the last 10 years as the field liaison, dealing directly with local county EMA offices and Homeland Security, representing Indot, also working in the State Emergency Operations Center during any activation that may occur.
So you're in pretty elite company there, Lyle. 41 years at Indot. That's amazing.
Well, Mike would say I'm just old, but that's okay, and he has several times too.
With respect.
It's been a good ride. Not really planning on hanging it up anywhere in the near future, but still have my eye on retirement down the road a little bit. But I've held a number of positions within the agency, and this by far, especially with Mike coming on board and being able to work directly with him, it's been a very, very enjoyable last year and a half since he's been with us.
And you mentioned that you guys have worked together in the past before you were both on at Indot. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I worked 32 years with the state police, and the last 9 years was with our Special Operations Division. And so Lyle and I worked together, the two agencies, with State Department of Health on strategic national stockpile distribution, which, I have to admit, we thought, hey, this is great practice, great, these three entities are coming together, and then lo and behold, COVID reared its ugly head, and we kind of used that plan, but expanded statewide.
No, we threw it out, Mike. It just wasn't applicable to what we were going to do.
The old plan was based geographically in regions.
48 hours, we realized that all that training we had done was not applicable to COVID.
Oh, wow. So kind of expand on that a little bit. What did we do once we realized that?
What we did, we had the agencies involved right at Stout Field, which was the hub, National Guard Armory, which was the hub for Department of Health, to distribute the commodities that needed to go out statewide. Mike, as state police representative on site, I was there as the Indot representative on site. He organized his troopers to, at first, escort our Indot vehicles as we made deliveries. So we worked hand in hand then. And again, this is still before he came on board with Indot. We worked really good together at that point, but what we had exercised in the past just did not apply to this particular thing. It was a whole new ball game. We established what was called a distribution task force, which was underneath the State Emergency Operations Center at that point. We had National Guard, Department of Health, State Police, and Indot in a command trailer outside Stout Field, and we took the organizational structure that we had and applied it towards the event. So it was pretty hectic in the beginning, but we developed a really good routine on how we wanted to handle it. And I think overall it was a pretty big success. From our viewpoint, it was.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure, you mentioned that the training, it wasn't applicable. I'm sure that the original training probably didn't include, hauling medical supplies and, coordinating interagency, later hauling vaccines and things like that. I'm sure that wasn't necessarily part of it, was it?
It was, but not to that scale.
Yeah.
Everything we'd done before was kind of a geographical region, like Southeast Indiana or Northwest Indiana or Central Indiana. But I don't think we ever thought that we'd be doing all 92 counties at the same time, and for such a long time frame either.
How long did that go on? Because I know that, we did it for quite a while. I know we had a lot of our plow drivers rather, they kind of volunteered and worked on that. But how long did that go on?
Well, first, Vincennes was a huge help to us coming up and making that drive from Southwest Indiana so that we could assign deliveries back to the Evansville, Boonville, Vincennes area. So they were a huge help to us. We started in March. We knew it was coming. We knew something was coming. And when we kind of shut down the government center in downtown Indy, we met initially one afternoon in one of the conference rooms and ended up going out to Stout Field that same afternoon to take a look at what we had. I think it was like mid-March when we started, and then State Police, they got out of it, I think, when was that? End of summer?
Yeah, we started right before St. Patrick's Day, so it's almost that anniversary. But yeah, it was late summer, I would say, when State Police got out, and then Indot beyond that.
We took it over full-time with no police escorts after that, after they left, and went till about, I think, mid-November was the last time I was out there. It was every day since March, or from March to November, working out there. And it was one huge experience.
Oh, I imagine so. And so, Mike, how long was it before you came on as officially at Indot after this all happened?
It was actually November of 2020 when I came to Indot. Retired from the state police on a Friday, and first day in Indot was the following Monday. So
I think we shut the operation down on your first day, didn't we?
I think so. Yeah.
All right. So I want to get into a little bit about the the original training that you had mentioned. We've done a lot of we've talked about COVID operations and how they kind of switched everything up on us. But what initially talk about the EOC and the training that we start with that you mentioned earlier that kind of had to be thrown out the window in the face of COVID.
In the past, the training on a regional standpoint, we would practice where medicine or equipment would be brought into an Indot facility, let's say Greensburg, and then we would have a handful of Indot vehicles and troopers escorting those vehicles, distribute them to counties in that area. So, like I said, a lot smaller scale, maybe 15 trucks and 15 troopers, where with the COVID stuff out of Stout Field, we were bringing in 120 Indot vehicles and 120 troopers at the same time. So it just really blew up size-wise.
Gotcha. So what I'm hearing is it kind of went from a small scale operation to a much larger scale operation. Very similar operations, but also completely different at the same time.
Right, right. And I think if anything came out of the exercises done the years before, it was that relationship building.
Yeah, it was. It
And
really was.
And I don't think people understand quite exactly how huge that really is, because, a lot of people think, they're all state employees, they all talk to each other. That's not always the case. We're not always the greatest about communicating and building relationships between the agencies, correct?
Right. State police, counting civilians, probably has 2,000 employees, and Indot's almost twice that size. And there's so many different facets to each agency that, some of the road troopers talk with their plow drivers that are out there because they're out there at the same time doing similar tasks, or in the same weather. But, mid-management, upper management may not spend that much time together.
Yeah, because it's easy to kind of get, Rusty likes to call it into your silo. And, we talk about, just we're separate, we're in the same building, but we're separate. And we don't talk, we don't make an effort to go back and forth necessarily until something crazy happens, and then it's necessary. And so many times, you see places kind of break down because they don't have those.
Comments on that one, Mike, about working in silos?
Yeah. The example I use is when I re-roofed my first house, and I'm sitting there with some other troopers and deputies over dinner, and I said, I'm going to re-roof my house. And one guy says, I've got an air compressor. Another guy says, I got a nail gun. And, another guy says, I used to re-roof, homes when I was younger. And so bringing those agencies together, tearing down those silos, makes the most efficient use of resources. And you're getting people that are, well-trained in what they do. Example, state police has a handful of people with CDLs to drive large trucks. Indot has got, a bunch of people to do that. And so it's not like state police had to go out and train a bunch of people to drive box trucks to deliver personal protective equipment. It's good use of resources. It's that I got a buddy kind of philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, gentlemen, we're going to take our first break here, and when we come back, we've used the term EOC quite a bit, but I'd like for us to explain it and really dive into what the EOC actually is. So we'll be right back with more on the DOT. At the Indiana Department of Transportation, it's not all work and no play. Indot offers employees unmatched work-life balance, competitive benefits, and perks like a 37.5-hour work week, paid holidays, paid time off, career paths, and tuition reimbursement. Entry-level positions start at $19 per hour. CDL drivers can earn even more, so stop grinding and start thriving. Go to indotjobs.com or text Indot Careers to 468-311 to apply now.
In 2019, distracted driving was a factor in nearly 2,000 injury crashes in Indiana, killing more than 20 people. To make Hoosier roads safer, hands-free while driving is now the law. That means you can't have a mobile device in your hand while driving. You can still use a phone or tablet in your car, but you must use a speakerphone, headset, Bluetooth, or other hands-free technology. Go hands-free. Learn about the new law at handsfreeindiana.com.
Did you know that Indiana is the crossroads of America for railroads too? Our Rail Programs Office conducts around 1,500 rail crossing inspections every year to make sure conditions and signage meet federal and state requirements. To learn more, visit multimodal.indot.in.gov. We're more than just Hoosier roads.
Welcome back to On the DOT with Mike Nichols and Lyle Sadler. And last segment, we talked a lot about the EOC. We said EOC quite a bit. Can somebody kind of tell me what that is and kind of unpack what the EOC is on a broad scale?
The state EOC, State Emergency Operations Center, is a unit within Homeland Security centered downtown in the South Building. The office setup itself is 3 tiers of cubicles. with television screens all around. We, under the Homeland Security aspect of what we do in response, work under what's called an incident command structure. And within that, there are groups that are designated as ESFs. That's an emergency support function. It would include communications, state police, National Guard, Red Cross, Public Works, you name it, they've got it down there. I think there's 15 or 16 total. Indot is ESF 1, and we like to think of it that they've made us number one for a reason, because no one can get to where they're going or can get out from where they've been unless we clear a road for them. So that's what we've set up. It's a good structure. We work well with the staff down in the EOC. Activations are rare, but when they happen, it seems to gel very quickly. It's a great mechanism to get things done.
Yeah, I agree. And the times I've seen it used, it's been amazing how quickly things kind of fall into place. It's like the plan is there, and it's kind of like a break glass in case of fire type of program. Right. So let me ask you this, Lyle, before I move on to my next topic. Me as a person in the general public, you mentioned that we have to clear the roads, and that's one of our primary functions in a state of emergency. But from a Homeland Security standpoint, explain how Indot fits in to all of that, because general public speaking, people think of Homeland Security, they think of police officers, air marshals, things of that nature. It doesn't necessarily come to mind to think about roads and how that affects the transmission of those type of services.
10 years ago, I was the statewide safety director. 10 years ago this month, there was something called the Henryville Tornadoes. 2 tornadoes hit the little town of Henryville in southern Indiana right off I-65, an EF4 and an EF2. Mike was down there representing state police. I did not know him then. I went down there in my safety capacity and ended up staying for 2 weeks straight. Situations like that, where there is significant storm damage, Indot will come in and provide resources such as trucks, backhoes, skid steers with grapple hooks, chippers, anything like that we can use to help the locals clear whatever roads they need under a bad situation like that. Snowstorms. This last snowstorm that we had, we were activated for a brief period of time. Indot was asked if we could provide a snowplow escort for an ambulance in one of the counties up north. Obviously, snow removal is our forte this time of year, almost out of it. But flooding is another big thing that we get involved in. And we have, I might add, we're becoming increasingly more involved with Indot's aviation unit and the use of drones. So one thing that Mike and I did last week was spend a lot of time here at the Traffic Management Center for an Indot perspective and for resource knowledge, if you will, to monitor the truck convoys that were coming in through Indianapolis all over the state and how that might impact our traffic patterns. So we actually sat down in here for a couple days and took a look at stuff like that. We get involved with a lot more stuff than people would think. In the summer, when we're not using brine tanks in the back of our trucks or the semi brine tank, we had a fire down in around Linton, I believe. It was in a forest, and I called the Homeland Security desk and told them we have the capability of hauling a lot of water for the pumpers, which we did also a few years ago when, unfortunately, there was avian flu, I believe, down in Du Bois County. Indot was involved with that. We hauled water in to a large degree to assist with the foaming operations to euthanize the turkeys. So it's not to belabor the point, but we do a lot of stuff people don't realize.
Yeah, absolutely. And the turkey conversation may become relevant again as of late.
I've heard that,
Yeah, we've had several farms down in that area. But I want to go back to one thing you said about drones. How would Indot use drones as part of the EOC? I imagine that, the obvious answer is, well, we can use the drones to monitor traffic, or if there's a roadway issue or something like that. But talk a little bit about how we use those.
Tell them about Fountain Town, what we did then.
Last fall there was a train derailment in Shelby County, and we got involved because the train actually went across a state road and had it shut down. So we had contacted our lead drone operator, James Kinder. He went out and put a drone up in conjunction with Homeland Security. They have a drone program, or unmanned aerial system program, and James was able to feed back live video to our intermodal folks, as well as the commissioner and the executive staff of Indot, because the train movements, the railways fall under Indot purview. And so it could literally give them a bird's eye view of everything, but then also it would feed back to our traffic management center so they could see, and if they needed to do rerouting, they could.
And I was about to say that's probably super helpful for like Cars 511 and some of those things that we maintain to help the general public see what's going on the roads, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's bringing all the resources Indot has for the public, and live updates and so forth, and real-time information.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about the activation of the EOC a little bit earlier in the segment, and real quickly before we go to the next one, I'd like to talk about our most recent activation during the winter weather event, and just to kind of give some context, when we activated the EOC, it was when we realized this was going to be a historic weather storm. We knew that all of the agencies were coming together to say the same thing. There was a very big effort to make sure that people understood the magnitude of this storm. So where does the EOC come into place in that context?
When I mentioned earlier that we had a request from a local county to provide a snowplow escort for an ambulance, that request was made through the state EOC. Anytime a county needs a resource, it has to take that route in order to obtain proper reimbursement in the future if it's applicable. The state EOC serves as that conduit of all information that comes in from a county. They glean the information, and they will funnel it out to whatever agency they feel it will belong to and take ownership of. So we will, when I'm at the ESF1 desk, I monitor the operations section of Web EOC and keep an eye on whatever might be coming in, and maybe get a little heads up when I see it coming in from a county, because it doesn't automatically get to me or one of the other ESFs immediately, because it has to be vetted and they've got to research a few things. So I get a few heads up every once in a while, and I've developed a pretty good relationship with the local HMDs around the state, and I may call them, or maybe our regional emergency response coordinator in a district, and say, hey, I've got this coming, I think. What do you think about it? Is it something you can do? So we don't sit and wait until I actually get something. We try to plan ahead as much as we can.
Okay. And so, last question before we head to the next break. What has to happen for the EOC to be activated? Like, what is the context in which it would be activated?
Normally, it would require several of what I mentioned before, emergency support functions, the ESFs, that would involve more than one or multiple state agencies in a coordinated response. On on an emergency basis. This last winter storm, National Guard was brought up, and they brought in teams that could actually respond on interstates to help assist people. I forget remember what they called those?
Highway assistance teams.
Highway assistance teams. So if it's foreseen to be a big event that's going to require multiple agencies to help coordinate together to respond, that's when we get the activation. And there's 4 levels. They're constantly on a level 4. When we move to a level 3, we usually get called in. And I only remember maybe a level 2 one time since I've been there. But it's overall it's just coordinated response amongst agencies when more than one's involved.
Okay, and what are the differences between the levels, if you don't mind, real quickly?
A level 1, you don't want to be there. You simply don't want to be
It's
around.
It's a bad day.
It's a really bad day for somebody. A level 3 would probably only require a handful of ESFs to respond. A level 2 is still a pretty bad day, but it's not as bad as a level 1, and would require more ESFs and would probably require, we anticipate more requests than normal coming in from multiple counties for assistance, whether it's supplies, whether it's transportation resources, fuel, communications, things like that.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll take our next break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about some of our training, and I particularly want to talk a little bit more in depth about something you mentioned earlier in the Muscatatuck training. So we'll be right back with more on the DOT.
This is Sergeant Todd Ringel with Indiana State Police. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, distracted driving claims thousands of lives every year. Many drivers use their cell phones while driving. That creates an enormous potential for fatalities and injuries on our roadways. Distracted driving is any activity that diverts your attention from driving, including talking or texting on your phone. You cannot drive safely unless the task of driving has your full attention. You can help us reduce crashes by putting down your cell phone, avoiding all other distractions, and just drive.
Somebody needs to report that pothole.
Why aren't they mowing the grass in the median?
When are they going to fix this road?
You know there's an easy way to get answers to those questions and report the problems you see on interstates, U.S. routes, and state roads. Dial 1-855-INDOT-4U to talk to a live customer service professional. That's 855-463-6848. Hate talking on the phone or have a fear of human interaction? We've got you covered. Go online to indot4u.com to use our Report a Concern tool. You can also report a concern through our Indot mobile app for iPhone and Android. If you've got questions, we've got answers at 855-INDOT-4U or online at indot4u.com. Did you know that Indot also has an eye on the sky? Indot inspects nearly 120 aviation facilities in Indiana, including seaplane bases and heliports. To learn more about these and other multimodal programs, go to multimodal.indot.in.gov. We're more than just Hoosier Roads.
Welcome back to our final segment of On the DOT. I'm here with Mike Nichols and Lyle Sadler, and we talked during the break about a lot of things that we're trying to do differently. But first, before we get to those things, I want to talk about the Muscatatuck training that we all used to do. Now, you guys mentioned Tom Vanderpool, and we'd be remiss if we didn't give Tom a shout out on the podcast because he did quite a few great things. And he was always, much like you said, Mike, during the break, planning for the big one. I've heard so many times about the Wabash Fault Line down where we live and how we're kind of due for an earthquake and things like that. And so in order to prepare for things like that, we used to go to the Muscatatuck training. Now, COVID kind of knocked that out for us, unfortunately. But, it was a wild type of training, like very immersive, very, I don't know that I have the words to describe it, but basically we all met at a Army base. Is that what it is? Or a National Guard? I don't know. But we met at this base and we would play a game. And I know people who just heard me say that are like, you're playing games on taxpayer. Trust me, this is something that you do not want to mess with. But it was cool. It was a neat exercise. So can you all kind of expand on the Muscatatuck stuff?
As you said, in my opinion, Muscatatuck was cool.
It was.
It just was. There was no other training that Indot ever did that will equal that.
And one cool thing about it, too, is we always had other state agencies that came in. I remember with the year I was there, we had Ohio there, and I think we had another, maybe Tennessee. I can't remember which ones, but we always had multiple state agencies involved.
Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky was there once. Michigan came down for it. Ohio actually came to play. And what I mean by that is they had their own tandem dump trucks with snow plows on it, and they learned things from Indot. It was shown or illustrated on a news clip in Columbus, Ohio, when there was a windstorm or tornado or something that went through Columbus 3 or 4 years ago. They actually used their snow plows to clean interstates of debris. They had never done that until after they had participated at Indot. So yes, kudos to Tom Vanderpool. He was the best person that Indot had when that section was developed. He had the right military background. He had the right Indot background. He was perfect to establish that office.
So I don't mean to cut you off there, Lyle, but before we move on to the next topic, I want to paint a word picture. We mentioned we're playing a game and that Ohio came to play and they learned things. Let's paint a word picture of what Muscatatuck is for those who may not know what it is.
Basically, it was a tornado scenario or an earthquake scenario, one of both at the same time. And this base was set up for military training. There were people from other countries that came here to train with the National Guard. There were a lot of service roads. There were buildings. It used to be an old mental hospital in the day. So it had a lot of potential to be a great training ground. We used it and set it up. We had our own crews that set up debris fields on roads, and we taught people how to utilize Indot equipment to move those things. It could be a car, it could be a bus, it could be trees, you name it, we moved it. We even moved a mobile home one year that was we pulled it on the road. That in itself was harder than pushing it off.
I think that was my year, by the way.
I think it was, yeah. But we got to practice comms, and we set up a sim cell operation on the base, and we had an operations center at the North Vernon unit where command staff would be, and then we had another radio unit in the Seymour district. This was all within Seymour's district. They've been great hosts in the past. It used every aspect that we could think of to mobilize during a disaster situation and what we would do. We brought bridge inspectors in. We had bridges that they would inspect with scenarios off the base. State police were involved. I got stories about state police. You guys do everything, but
well, and this facility it brings an exercise to as close to real life in a controlled environment on a pretty decent sized scale. When I was down there as part of the state police, I actually went out with an Indot crew, and there's a methodical way of clearing the roadways. They just don't come barreling through with the plows down, pushing everything out of the road because, they're inspecting cars. There could be injured or deceased people in the cars or on the grounds, and they had role players and dummies out there to help simulate that. The closer to real life that you train, the better you are when the incident happens.
Yeah, I agree. And the cool thing about it was, I don't know if either of you watch Parks and Recreation. I've made a couple references to that show on this podcast. But there's an episode where all of the government in Pawnee has to go and do an emergency training. And it's similar to what we did here. But what you see on the show is much smaller scale compared to what we're doing. Because we're talking about buildings that are literally engineered to look like parking garages that are falling in. Real cars. This isn't just, a fake car. This is a real car that they brought in, a real mobile home. And we try to set it up to where not only are we just going through the motions and learning how to do the things, but we're setting them up as if they are our actual state roads. That was one of the cool things I thought about it. And then all of us on the command center, I was part of the command center when we did it, we get given scenarios as part of it. And then, we could have a monkey wrench thrown into it completely. Talk a little bit about the actual, I don't want to call it a game because it's not a game, but talk about that aspect of it.
It took us months to develop a specific scenario that we wanted to exercise the year that we were going to be down there. We would normally do it in September or early October. Once it was over, we may get 1 or 2 months where we got back to where we were before on some other things, but we started planning months in advance. There were, like you said, we were throwing injects in left and right. We had to get the right observers. We had to get the evaluators. And as you said, we traded off districts. We alternated districts. It was, as Mike said, it was to establish something as close to real world experiences that we could come up with. We had power lines down that taught our guys, okay, how close can you actually get to a power line before it's going to go off or you're going to get electrocuted? And it's a lot further out than what you might think. You can't just walk up and see the vehicles. We learned a new policy with safety about how we would tag vehicles that we pushed off the road after they had been checked. You check for gasoline leaks underneath it because you didn't want a spark to go off and cause things to blow up. It just was an opportunity to recognize things that you wouldn't normally experience, but yet if Tom's big one happened, you're going to get thrown into it immediately. First and foremost, you're going to take care of your own family. All right. If you can get into a unit or a sub-district, then this is going to come into play. We didn't want to blindside anybody. We wanted them to be prepared.
Yeah, and I think through that program, I learned a lot personally, and I can say that. And, we talked during the break about how, for so long it felt like, Muscatatuck was kind of the bread and butter, but you guys are really expanding on the things that Tom started, correct? Talk a little bit about that, Mike.
Yeah, Tom, with this large-scale exercise, laid a great foundation for our program. And, so if we can do a large-scale exercise, then the smaller-scale exercises are a lot easier. And one of the things that Lyle has served also is a liaison to the, besides DHS, but the county emergency management agencies. And so we have been going out, talking with them, working with them on upcoming events. We have Thunder over Louisville coming up, and Indot has a relatively large footprint, about 40 to 50 people with vehicles, the aero boards and so forth that we help the state police close specific ramps or the interstate. So, we have resources we can help on those things. Another thing we've been working on is our spill response program. We, in the past, if a crash happened and a commercial carrier loses, fuel, a couple 100 gallons of diesel fuel, well then, if they didn't have a cleanup company, contractor, everybody just kind of stood around and it was, whose responsibility is it?
And that's a big one from a customer service perspective, because the general public doesn't care whose responsibility is. They just want it cleaned up. You know,
Right.
They don't want it to ruin their vehicles. And for me as a customer service person, you know, I just sit and think, you know, how do we get this done? And so it sounds like you guys have made that easier.
Yes. One of our deputy commissioners, J.D. Brooks, had this idea of, you know, having a contractor that at the last ditch resort, we can call out and have them clean it up. And if we have a responsible party, then through our DamageWise program, we will bill them back.
I might add that JD threw that into Mike's lap on his very first day of work.
Yeah, I said, what does a trooper know about hazmat spills? So I kind of set the tone early, but with kind of a new relationship we forged with Indiana Department of Environmental Management, their emergency response people, we've been working hand in hand with them on developing this program so we can clean up the crash quicker. That goes along with our end time. You know, we want to open roadways as quickly as possible, do it in an environmentally friendly way, what's good for the environment, but then also preserve Indot's assets of the roads and bridges and such.
Yep, absolutely. Well, gentlemen, we are about out of time. Is there anything else that you all would like to add before we get out of here?
I've talked enough. It's Mike's turn.
I would just like to stress to the public to use the resources Indot has out there, like the 511in.org page. This year during the winter, you know, we've got plow cam pictures up, and that's been a great asset, and we've heard a lot of good report from that. And that's so many different entities from Indot coming together for customer service.
Yeah, absolutely. I've used them on social media as well. They've always engaged really high whenever we use those plow cam pictures. Absolutely. So I would echo that as well. And gentlemen, I just appreciate you guys coming on, and thanks for everything you do for the state.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
This has been On the DOT, a production of the Indiana Department of Transportation. For more information, please visit our website at indot.in.gov. For the latest updates on road conditions or construction, you can download our Indot mobile app for Apple and Android devices. Submit your roadway concerns by calling 1-855-INDOT-FOR-YOU or online at indot4u.com. Find all of that information in the description of this episode. Full episodes of On the DOT are available on YouTube by searching for Indot. You can also follow Indot and all 6 of our districts on Facebook and Twitter. If you like what you're hearing, please be sure to leave us a rating on your favorite podcast platform. Join us again every third Thursday for new episodes of On the DOT. Until then, travel safely, and thank you for joining us on the DOT.